It is my pleasure today to be showing off the 2018 Mazda CX-9. This is the Grand Touring trim finished in a lovely shade of a soul red metallic. This is the largest car in the Mazda lineup, and it shares the Kodo design language that's present on a lot of other Mazdas. I really love this design language. I think it looks absolutely phenomenal when it first debuted on the Mazda 6, and I think the CX-9 carries that design over really well. If I did have one complaint with the design of this car, it's that I think the headlights and taillights are just a little bit small compared to the rest of the car. That's pretty much a small complaint. Other than that, I think that a lot of people would agree with me when I say that this is probably the best looking car in this segment, the 3-row non-premium crossovers. And Mazda is really trying to position themselves in between a luxury and non-luxury automaker. So they're not quite at the level of car makers like Buick and Acura, but they're trying to prove themselves to be a little bit more premium than your standard Honda or Toyota. And I think that's going to come through when I show you the inside, because it is really, really nice. So again, other than, my small issues with the headlights being a little bit small for such a large vehicle, they look fine, on their own, but I think it just looks a little bit small considering that this is a very, very large vehicle. The rest of it, including the front grille, and especially this paint color, just really makes this car come alive. So now I'm going to show you the inside. Of course, we have keyless entry on our Grand Touring model, which prices out at around $42,000. And we have this very lovely tan leather interior, which I think the color combination just goes extremely, extremely well with the red exterior. And like I said, the Grand Touring is the highest trim model, so once we step inside, you'll see that this is pretty much as loaded as a CX-9 is going to get. We have things like our heated seat controls, our heated steering wheel, we have dual zone automatic climate control up front, and then we have a separate rear zone in the back. So it's actually tri-zone climate control, which is actually standard on all of the CX-9s. We also have the sunroof up here with a dead bug on it. And the interior is pretty nicely laid out. If you've been in any Mazda car recently, like the Mazda 3, Mazda 6, even the Miata, a lot of this stuff will look familiar to you, including the 3-pod gauge cluster. So on the Miata, they actually position the tachometer here in the middle to put it front and center. But on an SUV like this, it really isn't as important. You're not really shifting gears, although you can do that on the 6-speed automatic transmission. So they just put the transmission over there. Over here you see that since my door is open, that's what's showing, but this digital pod shows things like your gas and fuel efficiency and all of that pertinent information. We also have some of our controls over here on our fully loaded controls. Here's the control for the power operating tailgate, turning the traction control and lane departure off, and then we have our parking sensor controls over here. We also have the blind spot monitoring that's included on this car. And as I got in with the keyless entry, we also just put our foot in the brake and start it up, and that fires up our 2.5 liter turbocharged engine with 250 horsepower and 310 foot-pounds of torque. It sounds pretty good, actually. It's not bad. You can also run that on regular gas. It does require premium if you want to get the full 250 horsepower, but if you're a little bit money savvy and you want to save some, you can put regular gas in it and it'll only develop 223 horsepower. And I've ran it both ways and didn't notice a huge difference, so I wouldn't feel too bad about putting regular gas in this car. We also have Bose audio, which sounds pretty darn good for a non-premium car like this, and that comes on the Grand Touring trim that we have here. We also have a head-up display. You can see that it'll also tell you navigation prompts when you have navigation ready, and also your adaptive cruise control, which does bring the car to a full stop in this car, just the way I like it. I hate those systems that deactivate below a certain speed, but Mazda does it right. One thing that Mazda doesn't do right in my book is their infotainment system. It's not bad, it just isn't my favorite in the auto industry right now. I think that this home screen is a little bit old-fashioned looking. It kind of reminds me of an early 2000s MP3 player, if you know what I mean. It's just kind of basic looking. The functions are all there. Here's your navigation that's included on this trim. So you can do things like plug in your destinations, do POIs and things like that. It does also have voice command that can be activated on the steering wheel, but I found that it doesn't work that well. You basically say things like, call dad, and it'll come up with 5 or more responses, the first of which is probably correct, but then it'll have other contacts from my phone that aren't even close to the word that I actually said. So I don't really love the voice command here. And as you noticed, I was touching the screen, so it is a touch screen. However, when you start moving, it actually locks you out. So you can control it via touch when you are in park, or I think moving at slow speeds. But then when you start moving, you have to come down here. This is a little controller that Mazda likes to use, so you can either turn, click in up, down, left, or right, and then you have a bunch of home run buttons around here that can help you reach quick destinations like your home, the navigation menu, the music menu, a back button, and this is for your radio favorites, which is pretty good. It also has the volume controls here, a lot like the German cars like BMW and Audi do. And I have no problem controlling the car like this, although I just wish it came with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Those systems handle their voice commands so much better, and they're much easier to do things on. So I really wish Mazda would just include it already. It would definitely make this a better user experience. Inside, all of these materials are pretty nice. The leather material is great. The steering wheel has this really soft leather, so the steering wheel is fantastic. And this here is actually real aluminum trim, which looks fantastic. I just wish that Mazda didn't have to put this cheap looking chrome in, because other than that, the interior actually looks fantastic and very highly premium, but the chrome definitely does take away a little bit of that quality feel from the experience. And if you like the feeling that you're in a car rather than an SUV, this is really gonna please you. I think that Mazda could have done a little bit more space freeing up. They could have freed up a little bit of more space here. You really only have this large cubby for putting your items in front of the gear shifter, and then you've got these 2 minimal cup holders here. You do have a small center console that opens up split folding so that you have easy access to things with your USB ports and your SD card slot for the navigation menu. But there's not too much storage. You do have some room down here next to your memory seat controls where you can put bottles and things like that, but it's no more spacious up here in terms of cubby volume than your average car. So in terms of that, I think there are other SUVs that are a little bit more spacious for you. And like I said, over here you have this configurable gauge. So right now I have it showing my range, and there's my fuel economy. I did beat the EPA's estimates. I did average around 22 mpg during the entire week that I had this car, which is pretty darn good for an SUV of this size. So now I'm going to shut it off, and we're going to take a look at the back seat, trunk, and the third row. So the back seat is actually a really, really useful area. I really do enjoy sitting back here. You have these rear sunshades that your kids will absolutely love when it's a hot day. They can just pull it up, clip it on there, and it creates sort of an executive experience. There's plenty of rear legroom here, even in the third row, which is surprising. So you have a decent amount of footroom here. You also have your controls. The rear seats are heated on this top trim, and you have climate controls that can be controlled on this display here. We also have, very useful for kids, is 2 cup holders, and then if we open this up, we have 2 USBs that they can use to charge their devices, so that's pretty handy. If you have more than 5 people and you're looking to try and get them in, this car is equipped with a third row. So you just grab this lever here, pull it back, And the third row slides over, and then you have access to the rear seats here, which just fold up. They are not powered, so you have to do it all manually. So once I hop back in here, I have a decent amount of room, and these seats will come back. Now, I'm not exactly tall, but my knees are hitting right here, so it's not the largest third row seat. There are larger ones on cars like the Tahoe, and these second row seats actually fold. They slide forward. They have a little slider on the front, so you can give your third row occupants more leg room in the back if they need it. So I'm going to demonstrate that to you now. So I can slide these back. You can see this seat is now in its forward position, which unfortunately sacrifices the second row legroom, but it does give those third row people a little bit more space. And there you see now it's in its all the way back position. And now we're gonna come around the back. We have the power operated tailgate. The one problem that I did find with it is that it sits kind of low. So I don't know if you can notice right here, it's not that tall. I'm only about 5'8" and my head's about to hit it, so it's kind of weird. You kind of have to duck under it to get in, but once you're in, it's pretty spacious back here. With the third row up, it's not exactly huge. You can still get you know, maybe a small bag along there, but it's really meant for hauling things with these seats down. You have plenty of space. They fold pretty easily. Now you have a ton of space back there. And the third row seats do have cup holders and a little bit of storage space on either side for the people who are in it. And obviously you can fold down those second row seats and you can have a huge amount of space in the entire car. And then when you want to shut it, you just put this push this button and it shuts. Alright, so now I've walked you through the inside and the outside. The only thing left is to take it for a test drive. So now I'm behind the wheel of the 2018 Mazda CX-9, and before I drove this car, I figured that it would just be a lot like other three-row crossovers in this segment. And by that I mean, it would kind of be forgettable. It wouldn't be very memorable. It would just be a complacent car to drive, comfortable on long trips, and that's about it. But I was a little bit surprised when I first got behind the wheel that Mazda filled this car with a lot of its sporty natures. Mazda is starting to become a company that is synonymous with just really good driving characteristics. I've driven a lot of the new Mazda models, including the new 6 and the Miata, and they drive better than a lot of the cars in the class. They have really good steering, really good feedback to the driver, and the CX-9 is surprisingly no different. I thought that because this is really just made to haul people around, that Mazda really wouldn't focus as much on the driving dynamics, but this thing drives incredibly, almost to a fault. So the steering is actually really heavy for a car of this size, which is great if you're trying to tackle a back road like I have here. So when I go around corners, I get a good amount of weight to the steering, which feels really nice when I'm trying to toss it around. But I don't think that a lot of people who buy crossovers like this are really trying to take them and toss them around on back roads. I think they're more interested in performing the daily commute and, you know, putting kids in it and filling it with all sorts of, you know, stuff. So I was kind of taken back when I found that this is actually a really competent driver's car. And I said almost to a fault because that heavy steering is a little bit of a hindrance when you're trying to park this car. It's very large, it's 4,200 pounds, and it's got, you know, the size of a 3-row SUV. So when you're trying to park it with that heavy steering in a tight spot, you have to do a lot of chopping at the wheel to try and get it in there, which, you know, I wish that Mazda maybe would have just toned back the sporty characteristics a little bit and instead just given this light steering that was still communicative, but I'd rather have it be a little lighter to get in and around parking spots. Now, I mentioned before that this car has a 2.5-liter turbocharged SkyActiv engine, and this is a big deal for Mazda because this is the first of the turbocharged SkyActiv units. and it provides really good power, 250 horsepower, and way better torque, 310. So that 250 number is actually a bit down compared to other cars in this segment, like the Ford Explorer and the Honda Pilot. Some of those have V6 engines, so that's kind of why. Mazda went with a 4-cylinder because it gets pretty darn good gas mileage. I averaged about 22 while I was driving this car around, and I was able to see as much as 26 or 27 on the highway, which is really, really good for a car of this size. And the one problem that I did have with this drivetrain is the 6-speed automatic transmission. I think that by now Mazda should maybe come up with an 8 or even a 9 or 10 speed automatic. It's what other companies are starting to come out with. And 6, just when you're accelerating from the get-go, it tends to rev really high, and the shifts don't happen to be that smooth. Once you're up to speed, the shifts are pretty imperceptible, but I think that an 8-speed would really just give this drivetrain the smoothness that it needs to be that near luxury experience that I think Mazda is aiming for. Now that being said, you know, the rest of the drivetrain is pretty good. When you're going to pass people on the highway, it doesn't even require a downshift to pass people. Thank you, 310 foot-pounds of torque for that. So, you know, this thing's actually a joy to drive on the highway, especially with all of the driving aids that are included on this. I love the adaptive cruise control. It's one of those systems that can actually bring the car to a full stop. When you do, all you have to do is either just tap on the accelerator or push the cruise control button, and it'll resume going, following the car in front of you. So when you're in stop and go traffic, this car will basically, you know, do all of it for you without you really having to touch the pedals. And that is what I call a really luxurious experience. I hate the ones that cancel at a certain speed. Not great. I have my issues with this interior. I love the quality of the materials. I love the layout. It's pretty good, except it's very car-like in here, which means I'm bumping my knee on this center tunnel here, so it doesn't really feel as big as the car prints on the outside. Some people may like that. They may like the feeling of a more intimate space, but other people like to sprawl out in their SUV, and this really doesn't allow for it. There's one little sport controller here, just sport mode on, sport mode off. There's no eco mode or anything like that. You push sport mode on and it gives you a little bit better throttle response. It holds the gears longer. I don't think too many people are going to use it, but if you do, it really lets you get on that turbo quickly, which is pretty fun. This car isn't a powerhouse at 250 horsepower, given its massive weight of over 4,000 pounds, but it does 0 to 60 in 7.2 seconds, so it's not exactly slow. It's a pretty good performer. I was really taken aback by how good of a driver's car this is. I don't think that a lot of other three-row crossovers are even trying to compete with this car in terms of how sporty it is to drive. I mean, I'm on a little bit of a fun road here, and I'm just throwing it left and right, and this steering is just letting me do it. It's really great. There's plenty of body roll. I mean, you'd expect that in any three-row SUV, but it's manageable, and it's, almost fun. I like a car that has a little bit of body roll. You get to, throw it in and judge that steering a little bit. It's great. This car is about $42,000 the way it's optioned. I could do without some of the options on here, but $42,000 for a car this big with all of these features, not a bad price to pay. I don't think too many people, when they're shopping for their three-row crossover, are saying, I want one that's really fun, but maybe there's somebody out there that puts a really heavy emphasis on it. And if you're one of those people, the Mazda CX-9, really good SUV, really good sporty choice for you.